Only if you make it to the regional finals, though. If you lose, then, you know, who cares, right?
Fantasy's not gonna like that, at least.
Yeah, fantasy wouldn't go for that.
Yeah, fantasy is pretty hardcore. All right, here we go. Gengur versus Red, and it's going to be Blood versus Forest to kick it off. Take it away.
Blood versus Forest. This is a classic Mofu. This is Roach, actually, too. So Roach combo. This is what Blood used to hate looking at. But it is aggro Blood, so it's not exactly, you know, control Blood that feared that.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when a huge revival of Blood was printing of Belphegor. It was a very different archetype than this, and they really just could not stand this matchup just due to their main mechanic just didn't work with it. But I think this time, it's just like a completely different interaction in that you mentioned that Red's list is actually kind of strange. It has a copy of Elf Queen, some Errands, and a lot of the more control-y late-game cards of the sort of Roach build. And I feel like it might actually have all been texted so that it could deal with this sort of matchup, that it can take all this damage and sort of withstand it past that. What do you think about that?
That's possible. I mean, Elf Queen is, it's a card that's like really interesting to put into your deck, right? Because it's not like you're not beating aggro with that card. That would be like Fairy Beast that comes down on 6. Elf Queen comes down on to beat, you know, mid-range decks usually, because she comes at 7, and by 6 you're basically dead to a well-curved aggro deck anyway. So it doesn't make too much sense to actually put that in your deck against aggro, in my opinion, at least. I don't know. Maybe we'll see it happen. Maybe.
Yeah, really interesting. Because Fairy Beast used to be how Forest dealt with aggro to begin with. So it's like he sort of made this decision, I guess, to run 2 Errands. A lot of decks might sometimes fit in a third. Maybe he's taken out the third to try to add an Elf Queen as well, just to have both options. But we'll see. As you said, the difference of an entire turn when you get the things like stabilizers like Elf Queen can just make such a huge difference. But this looks like a really rough situation to me anyway. Even though he's opened some really nice anti-aggro cards like Wood of Brambles and Ancient Elf, I think all these things are just so much rougher for Forest to try to develop against aggro when they're on the draw.
Oh yeah, definitely. This is, I mean, it's no other better way to say, like, this is already a bad situation already. And look, the fight's gonna make it even worse. This is a terrible situation already for Red. His hand is really, really bad at combating this.
And on the other side of things, it's like, this is sort of the ideal scenario for aggro Blood, when they open a hand that isn't too fragile, makes it very difficult to trade in, and at the same time has something that it has the guarantee of going into a Carabosse on curve. So what would Red need to come back here?
Oh, that Sylvan Justice is a great start. That is an amazing start. You just have to throw a fairy away to do that, though, so...
Unfortunately, doesn't have enough to play both Wood of Brambles, otherwise this would be a very clean trade into the Vite. But he does manage to eke out onto board here. The bat generators are gone, so the Vinya's not going to be pushing too much. I think Red has a chance.
I don't know. I think we're actually probably going to see what I mentioned earlier, where like Fairy Beast will be able to help him a lot more than Elf Queen would. But Fairy Beast does have that drawback of, like, if your hand is too small, then you don't heal anything anyway, so... I don't know, I think Red just might be donezo to begin with.
Right. I guess another pretty relevant question is, if he can survive to Elf Queen, I actually think he just absolutely has this in the bag. Because even just by playing out followers that trade into things, he's already gained a pretty sizable amount of shadows that he can deal with things like Carabosse's Tick. But it just occurred to me, like, so Gengur plays Carabosse next turn, like nerfed and everything, like even with the stat loss, but I don't see an answer to it on Red's side in any capacity for his turn 6.
Right. It's even with the Carabosse's adjusted stat line of 5/5, she only lost 1/1, and it's not like she's gonna attack anything that isn't this Ancient Elf. So this is gonna be a Carabosse going into putting Red at 1, or
and a Razor Claw to finish him off.
Yeah. Oh, Gengur. I'm not a mathematician, but I think 3 + 3 + 1 is 7.
Could be.
So Gengur did just miss lethal.
Yeah, I have to bust out my abacus to make sure of that one. Quick math.
Quick math. He did put him at 1. It doesn't really matter. I mean, he's at 1, so and he can't Fairy Beast. He can't do anything. So doesn't really matter.
Funnily enough, in this scenario, even if he had Fairy Beast, I think there's actually nothing that pushes him through that one. So, unfortunate.
Yeah.
Drew some tools to try to contest the board, but just not good enough to handle like such a strong aggro blood curve.
Aggro Blood is insanely powerful. If it's on the play, if it draws, we've seen time and time again where Aggro Blood can be on the play. I mean, it's going first, and just kind of draw, sometimes even mediocre hands and just kind of destroy people. It's a very, very powerful deck when it's going first. When it's going second, it's not so much, but when it's going first, ooh boy.
Yeah, it's probably also worth explaining that even though going first and going second isn't really always up to the players, I think a lot of decks have a lot of interesting interactions with it, in that it can often decide whether or not you have early game dominance of the board or whether you have a lot of value generated over card advantage and Evo points. So Forest being a deck that doesn't really have good ways of evolving to get back onto the board, it doesn't have like Cudgel or Dragon Warrior, things like that. Instead, it just has like development, like Elven Princess Mage. It's so tough for it to like make that value transition into sort of board dominance. But that said, that matchup is over, and now this is something I think we've casted many times before. Burn Dirt versus Ramp Dragon.
Good old Burn Dirt. I'm scanning the lists here, going over. Gengur does have a weird like one of taboos sitting in his list, but I think we've probably seen like every iteration of Burn Dirt that is probably going to come out before rotations happen. I don't think there's really any too much experimentation you can do with this deck that'll change it up too much.
Yeah, it's just a very solid and consistent list with what it wants to do. Interesting that you mentioned how rotations might affect this deck. It seems like it has all of its mainstay cards, but loss of Levi, Red Hot Ritual, these are things that we're going to see like kind of define the deck, even though like every game we get to see it in.
Exactly. You're gonna lose a few cards that are important, but most importantly is an entirely new expansion plus faction being added.
Right.
So that will affect it in accordance. Or maybe it won't. Maybe they'll play the exact same 40 cards and be just as good. Who knows?
Right. If things sort of end up getting reprinted or have similar cards be made, but for the time being, I think the card we're seeing here that has been a nuisance since turn 2, as it kind of is every single game, like Magic Illusionist is here to stay. He's from Rise of Bahamut, if I remember correctly. So it's going to be another extra expansion of Burn Dirt just getting to play with him and him causing this same issue of Red still just having to kind of solve the puzzle he puts up.
Right, because it's those later amulets that make him the most powerful, which is Cauldron and Starseer's Telescope. Those are the ones, and Carl, of course. Carl actually contributes a lot to Illusionist, but those are the cards. Those are very new, so they're going to support Illusionist through thick and thin for a while.
I think to even get even further into why Illusionist is such a good card, because I've actually been asked a lot of the time what's even worth about running him. A lot of people didn't see his potential early on. And I think it's demonstrated well in this game in that the advantage of having just damage applied to your opponent every turn, no matter how well they can control their own life, like through healing or through putting up wards to try to stop him, it's just having that advantage puts you exactly where you want to be in a deck like this, like Burn Dirt.
Exactly. This constant pressure is very powerful. Bahamut's also pretty good against it, but that's not that good of an option. You're already at 6 life. Red is feeling the pressure here, and it's a lot because of that Magic Illusionist. That was a lot of it.
So I actually didn't know that was how that interacted. I didn't know that Bahamut destroying the sigils at the same time also denied Magic Illusionist's effect, but makes sense. I don't know how I somehow dodged watching that. I'm used to seeing Burn Dirt kind of get through it before Bahamut, but that Bahamut kind of puts him in a tough spot. He has to answer it or figure out lethal, lest get smashed by the Bahamut and the Genesis Dragon.
That is kind of awkward. Your opponent's playing Genesis Dragon, even 3 Urds, so Fortes and everything. So open deck lists can be very very good if you use them. Gengur has to assume that Red has drawn probably some kind of storm damage. I mean, he's got access to 3 separate ones. in his hand, so.
Guess if that's the case, it all comes down to the Oz.
Ooh.
And an empty
That is
one.
not good.
Right.
That's a bad Oz.
I mean, there are some Oz's that are like this. That's like, there's good things about it and there's bad things. Drawing no spells off of it seems terrible, but it does mean that if she dies, you don't have to toss those cards away. But sometimes this happens and you need an answer to something, and just, nope, it wasn't in your next 2 or 3 cards. And that can just kind of annihilate the advantage you had.
Yeah, you just literally die in 1 turn. That wasn't even a combo. That was just like literally slap down Bahamut and then follow up with Genesis Dragon. That was probably the most bland dragon win I think we've seen in NGE. Like the exact opposite of Lest slapping down Imperial Dragoon, right? Like.
I mean, gosh, like Bahamut's stat line just matches up so perfectly with Genesis Dragon. It makes me think like, at this point, Bahamut is pretty much just like a Dragoncraft card. I think like Blood is the only other class that's ever made like effective use of it. But back to Forest it is, but it's still gonna
V2 played it in control neutral forests, so don't appropriate my dragon, buddy.
Right, I can't lock that behind a single class's culture.
Exactly.
Now between Burn Dirt and Roach Forest, I actually feel like this is a matchup I don't see that frequently. Just a matter of these two being kind of niche decks from time to time. Who would you say is like has the upper hand in this?
I'm conditioned at this point to say that Burn Dirt Rune always has the matchup. I feel like it I feel like it's just
that's fair.
it's so powerful. I'm there. I'm right for it. I'm a natural cheerleader for it.
Like I remember like we watched it go on just absolute win streaks over many matches like back when we were casting a lot, but I feel like ever since then I left that thinking, okay, well, that's the best deck ever. But I've actually seen it mess up a lot lately. Like in the previous game, it had a really, really solid opener all the way through. It's just unfortunate that an Oz just misses like that. But I don't know, for some reason I'm just seeing it not find that last ticks of damage really that frequently anymore.
Well, I mean, not everybody can be Sazone and hold on to 12 damage with Oz. And there's obviously going to be, if you cast enough tournaments, there's always going to be situations where Oz is not perfect, right? It's called variance, and it happens in card games, everybody.
Very true.
It's not her fault, Mofu, come on.
I didn't mean to sound like I was making it all Oz's fault, but more
Bully.
or less though. The villain bullying Oz. It's just a cool card, and I'm glad she's going to be around for a long time. Please don't take it personally. But again, this is a matchup that puzzles me a lot, just because I feel like Burn Dirt isn't really a sort of list that, unless it opens with Magic Illusionist like immediately, it usually doesn't find the damage to just kind of end the game super early. And Roach is a deck that just sort of functions perfectly fine if given that time.
It can, right? I mean, neither of our players are holding their combo pieces per se. Like there's EPM and Tina or Fina rather, but there's no bounces for Roach. If Gengur were holding, instead of Taboos holding a Master Mage Levi, I think you'd be in the Dirt Rune bucket boat / car. I don't know what to call it, honestly.
The Dirt Rune train.
Yeah, the Dirt Rune train. Yeah, the pain train.
I definitely feel that. I think, funnily enough, as you mentioned that, it's like both of these decks are teched in a way to actually like deal with threats. Like there's a Cassiopeia and Lilac kind of sitting in the hand of red. It's like if either had more aggressive options, it could actually like lead into having the advantage immediately of like where they go with it. But at the moment, yeah, as you said, just holding both of these things is like, it makes this feel more controlly to me than like the matchup usually goes.
It is, it kind of is, right? Like, Gengur's got to play these cards. He's got to make sure that he actually heals, because that one damage actually could matter. The way Roaches stack, right, with fairy damage. But, I don't know, Double Illusionist is looking pretty good for him, too.
Right. The very least, sometimes I feel like one of the weaknesses of Illusionist is like, it can get rid of sigils on your side, but he's already developed enough that he's like more or less ready to just throw it down for damage. And here comes Taboo's with a really, really strong swing.
That made Red sit up in his chair and just like really think about his next turn. You saw that. I know you saw that, right?
Yeah.
He was just like, okay, that's a good play.
I mean, Red knows that he doesn't have any kind of lethal here, and the very best, this Cassiopeia can clear somewhat. Ooh.
That is a very bad Cassio. Oh gosh.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen that kind of scenario happen often, Cassiopeia doesn't allow you to kind of target where every single tick goes, so usually it's good enough at clearing the board. I wish I could read what Gengur's trying to tell us there.
I had no idea what that said. I tried. I looked so hard. I don't know what it said.
Yeah, I
no.
put a like looking glass up on the screen, but gosh, I can't believe the Shadowverse has made me call it magnifying glass and looking glass. But what have I become?
through the looking glass. What a oh my god, Mofu.
Gengur with the 2-1 win, and incidentally, the thing that he held up was a piece of paper that said easy.
Bottles BM'd us, or BM'd his opponent. Gengur BM'd his opponent.
Oh man, I think emotions are riding high here. People really want the win, you know?
Just what happens in North America? I mean, it's possible. It's the last weekend.
Yeah.